In the last episode, we talked about how leaders create capacity by changing how they lead. We talked about reducing the number of decisions they have to make, clarifying priorities, and establishing consistent leadership routines in order to be able to sustain some of these things. Today is part two of that conversation. And we are going to shift our focus from the leader to the team. Because even when leadership capacity improves, sometimes the team still struggles if the work is too heavy or overcomplicated or unclear. Again, I want to say teams don't burn out because they're lazy or unmotivated. They usually burn out because the way work flows make everything harder than it really needs to be, or it's just completely unclear. So this episode is about how teams build capacity by simplifying some of the work and creating processes and workflows and things like that. Let's break it down. Welcome back to Leveraging Operations and Leadership, the podcast for business leaders who want to build strong teams, create clarity, and operate with less chaos and more confidence. I'm your host, Tanya D. Harrison, leadership and operations consultant and trainer, and founder of Signal Partners. This episode is part two of our two-part series on building capacity without hiring more people. If you haven't listened to part one, I recommend starting there because leadership capacity sets the foundation for everything that we're about to discuss in this episode. Now, let's talk about the team side of capacity. And here's the reality for most small teams. They're not overloaded because there's too much work. It's usually because the workflows are overcomplicated or too long or requires too many handoffs. And what we want to do is we want to streamline a lot of that in order to help the team get more done and things flow at a better pace. Team capacity really grows when the work is easier. And I don't mean the actual task, but sometimes it can be really hard just to get started. Files are all over the place. You don't know what you need to get started. Expectations aren't clear. And when this happens, we have more mistakes. And that causes, again, more work. Before we talk about solutions, we need to name the real problems. And some of the problems that I've identified in working with teams is processes live in someone's head. They're not documented or shared with everyone. Instructions change depending on who acts the task. So there's no consistency. Updates live in too many places. It's unorganized. And people aren't sure who owns what. And ownership is a big part of helping your team to be accountable. So basically what ends up happening is, again, there's more errors, rework, you get delays, teams are frustrated. You may even miss deadlines that you should not have necessarily missed, and confidence starts to drop. Now, none of this means that your team isn't capable. You hired them for a certain level of skills that they bring to the table, but it does mean that the system they're working with isn't working. And that's what we want to talk about today. So just like we did in part one, we had 3 levers to create greater capacity. I want to share 3 levers from the team perspective. Again, is this all the levers? No, but we're going to talk about the main 3 that I see when I'm working with teams, especially small teams. The fastest way to increase team capacity is to simplify how work gets done. So the first lever is process simplification. Sometimes we just overcomplicate things. And it may not necessarily be that your team needs more processes. if you already have processes. Now, if you don't have processes, your team needs processes. But when you're creating the process, they need to be clear. I don't necessarily mean that you need to have a lot of processes, but the ones you have, they need to be clear. And you can start to determine the level of clarity. You can start by asking yourself some specific questions. Number one, what is the critical path to go from where I am now to where I want to be with success? So part of creating these processes and workflows, we have to be able to identify what success looks like and what is the critical path. What are the things that absolutely have to be done? Asking yourself this question may open up your eyes so that you can see there's some things that you're doing that you may not necessarily need to be done. Second question, where do decisions slow things down? Are they coming to you where they have to get approval for certain things and you're the bottleneck? Is it dependent on somebody else? What does that look like? And question everything. Like, why? If they're coming to you, why? Is there a decision or parameters that you can give them so that they make the decision instead of you having to make it? Usually there's a process that you go through in order to come to the decision. Is there something that could be shared with them and put into the process of the workflow so that they can automatically do it? Also, where do mistakes usually happen? That's a clear indication that something's not clear if mistakes are usually happening at a certain place within the process. And then what gets repeated every single time? Because as a part of this, we're going to talk about automation. So are there pieces of it that can be automated? Start by asking yourself those questions. And one of the things that you're going to see is that when a process is clear, the team is going to move faster without even rushing. It's going to automatically happen. So the first lever is process simplification. The second lever is role and ownership clarity. Capacity disappears when no one knows who owns it. Then you get into the, oh, I thought that person was going to do it. Oh, I thought that person was going to do it. No, it needs to be clear. Who owns it? Whose role is this and who owns it? You need to be able to go back to a specific person for certain things. It doesn't mean that you don't have to have backup. So if you have somebody who does the onboarding process, they may be the primary person. If that person is out, then you may have somebody else that is the secondary owner, but you still have an owner and they know when they step in and when they don't step in. Ownership has to be clear. When ownership is clear, you're going to have fewer questions getting asked, fewer things getting stuck, and accountability is going to improve naturally because they know they own it. They're responsible for it. So if someone has a question, they're going to go to them for it. If job well done, they get the job well done. But if something doesn't go well, then you're going to know who you need to go to. Clarity creates confidence, and you're going to start to see that the confidence is going to rise. So that is number 2, the second lever, role and ownership clarity. The third lever is automation. So just like we talk about automation for leaders and some things that they could do with AI, it's the same with the teams. However, the first 2 levers need to be taken care of first. Once the work is simplified and ownership is clear, then automation can actually help you. And this is something critical that you have to remember. You do not automate chaos. If you don't have a defined process, if it's not already clear, you should not be moving to automation, because what's going to happen is you're going to automate problems because you haven't worked through certain things. Once you have things clear and simplified, then you can start with automation. And remember, one of the questions that we asked ourselves earlier was, what is something that repeatedly gets done? Because that's a great place to start when we're talking about automating. So automation should support repeatable, predictable work, and it will not compensate for unclear processes. It just won't. You could use AI as well, create call summaries. That's really good. So if you are a coach, consultant, or a service provider, you have a call, have it create the summaries, especially if that's something that you send to your clients. If you are receiving intake forms, maybe having that summarized, also being able to have it flag missing information. And there's just a lot that you could do when integrated with the right tools. Like when it's integrated with the right tools, it can help with capacity forecasting, which is something that a lot of small teams struggle with. And we want to make sure that we get that right as a leader and for our team, because again, we don't want our teams burning out. We really want them to be all on board when they are at work and bring in their full selves. And so what we could do is that we could automate some of the things that need to be automated, use some AI, streamline processes, and then you can start doing more capacity forecasting so you truly understand how much capacity you and your team actually have, and take this into consideration when you are bringing on new projects or clients. So AI, it helps teams spend less time figuring out how to do certain work and more time actually doing it. What capacity looks like when systems are working? Oh my gosh, when teams have the right systems in place, work moves with less supervision. You as a leader, you don't have to be as involved in the day to day as you may be now. Fewer mistakes happen. Deadlines become more predictable and not missed as often. Communication gets clearer and overall confidence increases from the leader perspective as well as from the team's perspective. And as a leader, this is when you stop feeling like the firefighter, and the team stops feeling overwhelmed, so you're definitely going to allow yourself and your team to get more capacity, meaning things are going to be taken off their plate. That means that now they can truly focus on the things that they need to be focused on and not bogged down with all of these other things. Teams don't need to hustle harder. We need to make sure that we have the systems in place to make work execution a lot easier. That is our goal. And listen, when the processes are simple, when ownership is clear, when you have automation to support workflow, you gain capacity without adding headcount. Now you can fully really see how much you and your team can produce. And what usually happens is that if you're on your own business, you see a level of growth. And as you grow, then you can start hiring additional team members. But now you know for sure if you really need another headcount because you've already done the foundational things that need to be done. And this is some of the work that I work directly with leaders in the leadership shift. It is for people that are preparing their businesses to bring on teams. So we do a lot of this work ahead of time before you actually start building your team. I work with people who have already built a team and they have not done some of this work. So we go back and we do it, right? It's easier to do it before you have a team. But if you already have a team, you still do it, right? I just recommend that before you make another hire, that you implement some of these things first, and then you can decide now how many people I need to hire and what skill set I need. Because once you start working through some of these things, you may decide that I need somebody maybe at a higher level or with a specific skill. But now you know that because you've cleaned up a lot of the stuff that people were doing that didn't necessarily need to be done or didn't necessarily need to be done that way. or by them because you implemented some automation. I want you to really keep this in mind because I think that we are at a great place when it comes to small teams where you can actually start producing bigger and better results with not as many people. And then, like I said, as you hire, because this doesn't mean that you're not going to hire. As your business expands, as your department grows, you'll have to hire people, but you'll be able to make clearer hires. You'll be able to hire people that you know you need to bring on the team because you'll be able to clearly see any gaps that there are. So that is it. I hope you enjoyed this two-part series. Again, if you haven't heard part one, where we talk specifically about the levers for leaders and things that they could do, go back and listen to that one. And remember, if you're ready to strengthen your team's execution and build systems that actually support capacity, this is the work that I do inside the Leadership Shift Coaching. The Leadership Shift Coaching is for, like I said, business owners that are looking to hire. So they want to build some things within your business before they actually start bringing people on, or they may have one person like them and an assistant. And then the lead ops program, which you can join the wait list because I'll be launching another cohort of that pretty soon. And if you want a practical starting point for your planning where you are trying to bridge the gap between goals and execution, because I know you can come up with some really great goals, but sometimes there is a gap between execution. I have a free gap guide that you can download, and it's going to help you align your goals and priority with execution. It's going to give you the tools and the things that you need to support how you execute. So you and your team knows exactly what to focus on and how progress is measured. You can download the gap guide and start closing the gap between planning and execution. And I'll leave the link to all of these awesome programs and guide in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me today. If this two-part series helped you think differently about capacity, I'd love for you to leave a review or share this episode with a leader who's trying to grow without burning themselves out. We are not taking burnout into 2026. Until next time, lead with purpose and operate with excellence.